right, I get to be the first arts presenter, break up the day for all you science folks. Thank you. Certainly not the first time arts has been mentioned from this podium. You've talked about ancient Egypt and the Bauhaus, and I had high hopes for the Etch-a-Sketch talk, but that was not what I expected. But I will be talking, and I think I'm the honored to be one of the first folks who will talk to you about arts. You've got Judith Schachter coming up in a little bit. She is amazing. We'll be teaching at Pilchuck this summer, and Carol Wright will be speaking about 3 millennium of glass later today, and Dale and Leslie, I think, have a recorded message for you tonight. Next? Yes, that's it. All right, back. So, 50 years in 20 minutes. I will just briefly, you just got my background, but one thing I want to talk to folks about is what is an arts administrator? I discovered my love for arts administration in an art history course in college where they were doing a video on Cubism, Picasso and Braque. And before the professor could go up and hit stop on the VCR, they said, thank you to the Museum of Modern Art for their exhibition of Picasso and Braque. And there was a woman pulling this Picasso guitar out of a box and setting it down. And it, like years of training of don't touch the art, I realized someone gets to touch the art. Someone gets to pick up the art, place the art, study the art, research the art, fix the art. And it just suddenly exploded my mind that there's this whole world of arts administration. So that's sort of the world we're in. And for me, other than that wonderful introduction from Kathleen, I really like to work with artists in their careers, bring art experiences to the community, and make sure kids have an opportunity to have arts as part of their education. So with that, I will dive into our 50 years about Pilchuck. I'm going to spend a bit of time on this slide because Otto and Harvey were important folks in our history. This is hard to give in front of Carol, so if I get it wrong, she'll correct me later. Pilchuck was founded in 1971, our 50th anniversary, delayed briefly by the pandemic. Every time I tell our history, I have to go back 9 years and start in Toledo, where for the first time in American history, a small furnace was put together and we were able to gather and bring this wonderful material that you all work with into the hands of artists. Not exactly in their hands, but at the end of a pipe to artists. A long tradition, of course, in Europe and going deep back in the Middle East. But really in America, that Harvey's credited as the father of the American studio glass movement. One of the few movements in any art history where you can trace it back to a very succinct moment and place in time. So there's Harvey out there in Toledo, teaching at the University of Wisconsin. Simultaneously, Dale Chihuly is in Tacoma, Washington, his hometown. And I want to thank the organizers for bringing the Seattle weather for us here today. I feel right at home. So Dale's studying interior design and architecture at the University of Washington. He's then invited out to learn under Harvey in this budding studio glass movement. And Dale then, upon completion of that program, goes and gets a Fulbright scholarship, as you'll do, and goes to decide to study in some of these great centers of Europe. And he goes to the former Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic now, and to England, Germany, Sweden, and just builds this incredible network of folks through his study, and then lands himself at the Vanini factory in Murano, Italy. One of the first Americans to go there, and he learns this sort of group technique. If you've seen glass blowing, there's multiple people in a dance making things happen, and Dale really learned that at the feet of the masters in the Vanini factory. So Dale comes back. He is teaching at the Rhode Island School of Design, and in the summers he decides he's invited to the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts to teach glassmaking. And he's looking around this mountains and the islands, the beautiful trees, and he says, I want to start something like this in my hometown, back in Tacoma in the Pacific Northwest. So he comes back and he starts scouting for locations, and this is sort of the Pacific Northwest, views from Pilchuck as it is now. But he meets his friend Jack Leonard Larson, who says, you need to meet this couple, John and Ann Gould Halberg. They have some property, they're involved in the museums, and they are interested in the arts. So he goes up, meets with John. This is a later photo, probably in the 80s, that's inserted there. But they start scouting locations, and Dale looks out over this view and says, this is where I want to put this place. Now, there's nothing. There's not a pipe, not a toilet, not a house, not a propane line, nothing. So they decide that's where they're going to do this, and they put out the first poster. And this is the No Deposit Lots of Returns Glass Workshop. Free tuition, bring your own camping and food, and come on up to the Pacific Northwest. And they set about doing this work in 1971. Now, I can't offer free food or free tuition anymore. But this was the first year. And now I'm going to jump around a little bit in time. So there was our 1971. But I like to think of Pilchuck really as three really key pillar areas of place, people, and creativity. This I think really is our stage, our actors, and our play, if you will, in another way. When we talk place, we certainly mention that we are on the ceded territories of the Treaty of Port Elliott tribes, and we partner very closely with a lot of our tribes in our region and continue to honor their contributions. This was a quote from John Halberg. If you were to go back here, this view, and you put a building on it, oh, I just hit pause. This view, and then you put a building on it and you have lunch. That's our lunchroom looking out over that view. So yes, you definitely are inspired when you're at Pilchuck. But first summer, bring your own camping gear, bring your own everything to the side of this mountain. So they are out there in the woods, lean-tos, some people inside stumps, on top of stumps, under yurts. That tree house on the left, Buster Simpson built that. It is still there today, Buster's tree house. This is the first year they're building the hot shop. There's Dale up in the upper left, Dale with Jamie Carpenter. If anyone's from St. Louis or has been to the St. Louis Arch, Jamie Carpenter, his company just built a new museum with this big glass disc at the base of the St. Louis Arch. So there he is in 1971, setting poles on the hot shop. Some artists sewing together some Army surplus tents. And this was our first summer. There's our hot shop. Self-made, in the middle of nowhere, nothing around, camping in the woods, slugs all around you. I heard that when they built that furnace, it started cracking, and by the end of the summer, which was really only about 8 weeks, it was easier to gather out of the side of the crack in the furnace than it was in the original opening. But they come to the end of the first summer, they're tearing things down, and John Halberg says to Dale, ever the businessman, John Halberg, how did you do financially? And Dale said, well, I started with a $2,000 grant from the Union of Independent Colleges, and I owe $7,000 to the bank. A point which I remind my finance committee at every opportunity that the financial difficulties started at the beginning. So John says, what will it take to do it next year? Dale thought about it, said $25,000. A lot of money in 1971. John says, I'll fund that next year, and I'll cover your note to the bank, and he proceeds to do that for about the next 10 years. But slow building a nonprofit, building more support, making partnerships, and building infrastructure for the organization. Slowly, also though, backing away. He wants the organization to sort of get up and on its own feet, and slowly gives less and less over the years. But here we go, 1973, I believe is this, the construction of our hot shop. Please come visit. These slides are not going to do it justice. But I just want to go through a few parts about place. This is our hot shop. This is how it looks today. And from the inside, I stand in there and look up and I think of it as a cathedral of glass. It's just an incredible space to make art. This is a flat shop. On the left is in the early years. Back then it was sort of stained glass and blowing. And so we had the flat shop and the hot shop. And then here as it is today, we mostly do borosilicate or flame working and our neon in that building. This is our lodge, which we were looking out of before. This has our library, our dining hall, which also becomes our social hall. There's our kitchen. So this is where we have and printmaking facilities. Studio building is under renovation right now. We're just completing this. This is where we do casting and a lot of variety of other courses in glass. I think my first summer they were building kilns and furnaces up there, so there were wires and things everywhere. Some of the student housing, year-round, some public artwork. This is a cast concrete structure on campus. And here's our library. If you're coming, your dorm, you got 2 folks coming from across the world, and you stay in one of those dorm rooms, and there's our printmaking facility. So people also. So we've got our stage set. Now let's bring on the actors. This was from our 25th anniversary, 25 years ago, for those who are really good at math. But obviously it's about our people and the techniques. Remember Dale went and studied all around Europe? Well, he comes back and he's the artistic director, and the phones start ringing in Europe. And he says, come on, come and teach. Come and teach in my class, come and bring your students. Let's build a partnership with your university. So up in the upper left, you see Jamie and Dale. In the middle here is Ginny Ruffner, is an incredible friend of Pilchuck. She's actually my landlord too now in Seattle. I live in her building. And then two great artists on the right is Dante Marioni, collection of the White House, I know if you Google him. And then on the far right is Lino Talipietro, who came in 1979 at the invitation of Benny Moore to teach the Venetian techniques. Not at great peril to himself, because it was not very well received that he was sharing all the techniques from Murano, but it was a moment that just changed at Pilchuck and their ability to work. He came over and said, "You're working the glass too cold," and just cranked all the furnaces up, and everyone had to learn how to work with this gooey material at the end of the, but he was able to do it and teach them these techniques. And as they built the infrastructure and as the organization grew, we're slowly shifting the center of the glass world from Murano, Italy to the Pacific Northwest, where arguably, you're nodding, okay, arguably it remains today. A few more folks here, Nancy Callan and Dick Marquis, and there's Ann Halberg. She was the queen of everything, I think, at one of our events. And then, this thing at the bottom right, there's John and Ann, and I saw this photo for 15, 20 times till I realized they're not on a horse, that's a slug. And there's banana slugs all over campus, and if you're out in the woods camping in the Pacific Northwest, you're gonna see a lot of those. This was our totem pole that was done in our 30th anniversary. It was carved, Tlingit tradition, brought down from Alaska. There's a whole ceremony. But 2 years ago, it had shown every bit of its 28 years, and we restored it, part of our 50th anniversary. The bottom is John Halberg. The middle is Dale, holding the raven, who's bringing the light. And by the way, the raven, the box of light, if you're in town, if you can get over to the Native American Museum here in town, Preston Singletary has an incredible show. He's on our board as Raven in the Box of Daylight. Longtime Pilchucker and board member. And then the top is Ann Gould Halberg. So we've got the stage, we've got the people, the creativity, the act, the dance, what's happening. So what happens at Pilchuck? We organize ourselves in sort of sessions, anywhere from one to 3 weeks, and it runs opposite of an academic calendar. So May through September, you come and you get on your train, you get on your plane, get on your automobile, you come, you show up, and however you get there, drop your bags in the dorm, and then it's a completely immersive experience. A typical day, you'd wake up, get your coffee, you go get a demonstration from a world-renowned artist in your studio, some bell rings and suddenly it's lunchtime, all the campus comes together and has lunch, and then there's a slide talk from one of the professors, one of the visiting artists. Then you go back out and you work, and then a bell rings and it's dinner time, and so it just happens, and then you go and you have dinner with all your friends, and then you go back out and work. Anytime there's a session, there's usually a party, there's a costume party, there's meat parties, I don't know, there's a butcher down the road, so. But most of us think there's lots of variety of glass, blowing, molds, neon casting, so a whole variety of materials, and we're doing outreach and doing some more work in our community as time has moved on. But contrary to Las Vegas, what happens there stays there. We like to think what happens at Pilchuck goes around the world and back. In 2019, we had artists and students from, let's say, 23 different countries, so we're very proud of our reach around the world. Here's just a few examples of some of the creativity. Yeah. Inflatables in the visiting artist program. Joey and Flora in the upper left in the early 70s, and some installations on our pond. Our Artist in Residence program is interesting because 1971, remember, glass in a way is only 9 years old in America, so Dale, one of his many ingenious things that he's done in his career, invited artists who were not traditional glass makers and invited them to come and just gave them the assistance and said, go and play. And so we've had artists from Maya Lin, who did the Vietnam Memorial here in DC, to Judy Chicago, Kiki Smith, who've come through and learned glass and at least added it as part of their repertoire. So that's someone working in inflatables in the 80s with feet. Some of the higher technology stuff you're familiar with is on the right. Shingy McLean is doing some work in printmaking, vitriography, which Harvey worked on quite a bit. So we've got printmaking facility. What we got next? It's funny, these two on the left, the writing and lights, I think those are like 30 years apart, but people always grab their photos and want to do something writing with light or writing with fire. So at 50, I won't read through this, but obviously you're at an inflection moment. You look back and you look forward, and so that's really where Pilchuck finds itself. We're actively working on a strategic plan while we're also digging up a time capsule and possibly burying another time capsule. We're fixing our campus, and we're reaching out to old friends and thinking about new friends. This is a series of this is what our session looks like this coming year. Our first one launching with a group of Indigenous artists in the community. We're calling it The Gathering. I think Judith is teaching in session 2, artists who deal with the body and figurative artwork. So there's a sample. Please visit our website to get information here. Let's see what we got next. So there's a rundown of what we're up to: courses, residencies, exhibitions, fine arts focus, and certainly that campus. Ooh. So we were talking about the future, and I love them. Who ended with, I don't know, I look forward to seeing what comes. I do too, but obviously we're working with mixed media and technologies. We're recognizing our need for diversity in our field and in our community, so we're very focused on scholarships and partnerships. And environmental, I think I'm not the first one to mention that here. I kind of told these artists, you melt things at high temperatures for a living. I don't know, we got to think about this. And so I turn and look to you and hope we can build partnerships and dialogue with the scientific community to reduce our impact in the environment. And then certainly our campus and keeping our partnerships up. So look forward to hearing more and interacting with you all. I thought we were questions. We'll just meet in person. So thank you all.